So dear noble ones, welcome to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we have a lot to say because the title of this video has already told you that we're talking about a very interesting topic, and that is the Moors. Now, the reason why there is a lot to say is because people say a lot about this civilization, this people, and I think it's important to present valid, documented evidence coming directly from the sources and real historical knowledge, because unfortunately there are some creators that have agendas when it comes to the Moors, and I think it's about time to sit down and discuss them. Clearly, the topic has become controversial, but you know me. Let's go. The word Mori, Moors, is an exonym, meaning a name that originates and is used outside of the context it defines. To simplify, the Moors did not identify themselves with this term. But who exactly were the Moors? This is where the issue becomes more complicated, because Moors is not a true ethnonym, but an artificial category conceived by Europeans in the Middle Ages, used until the modern age in a fairly variable manner to define people of Islamic faith, and to be more specific, including those people that came from the Maghreb, expanded into the Iberian Peninsula, including modern-day Spain, and conquered it. The word Mori derives from the Latin Mauri, which in turn comes from these Greek words. Now, in this case, so when we use the Latin word Mauri, then we are discussing a specific ethnic definition of Berber origins, which, according to Herodotus, settled in Morocco, and who, according to Pliny, had already been reduced to just a few families due to several wars by the 1st century AD. It should, however, be noted that even the term Mauri seems to be used with some flexibility by the classics, and if initially it indicated a specific people of Morocco, later the definition seems to include also the Berber people of western central Algeria, eventually extending in late antiquity to all Berber people from Morocco to modern-day Tunisia. Now, digging a little deeper when it comes to the actual origins and etymology of the Greek word, it has been suggested in the past that it was possible that the origins were connected to a Phoenician word, so something used by the Carthaginians that meant Westerners, indicating all of those people and populations living west of them, so Carthage. Still, today, the most likely hypothesis points to this specific Greek adjective, which means dark, most likely in reference to the complexion of the Mauri, understood as the original tribe mentioned by Herodotus and Pliny. Now, to avoid any possible misunderstanding of this, when I say that these people had a dark complexion, that doesn't automatically mean that they were black in the way we use the term modernly. And what I mean by that is that usually when we read the classics, the ancient Greeks utilized different words, such as, for example, melas, but I'll put a few on the screen, to identify those people that today we would refer as black Africans, and some people call sub-Saharan African. Now, I'm not really a huge fan of the term sub-Saharan, also because there were some sub-Saharan Africans, so black Africans that were living in the north of Africa at this time. See, for example, almost the majority of the population of the city of Feline. So usually I tend not to use sub-Saharan anymore, but black Africans, so we understand each other. The terms that are normally used to indicate black people from Africa are not the same terms that are used to indicate this type of population, so the Maori. And as a proof of this, when we read Diodorus Siculus, as he tells us about a specific population, the Asphodels living in Tunisia, that's where they had their settlements, but these people are black. In fact, he uses this term to identify them, particularly when he's comparing them to other populations such as the Melanogaetuli that Ptolemy, for example, tells us about. Between 647 and 709, the Arabs of the Umayyad Caliphate carried out the conquest of the Maghreb, subjugating the local population of Berber origin and converting them to Islam. Initially, the Arab conquest had a significant impact from a religious and cultural perspective, but in ethnic terms, it must have been relatively marginal. While originally the Caliph granted land to Arab soldiers, creating a sort of landed aristocracy to which the Berber populations had to refer to, by 710 there would have already been several important figures within the Arab governorate of Berber origin, such as the famous general Tariq ibn Ziyad, who gave his name to Gibraltar, the mountain of Tariq, and in 711 began the Muslim conquest of Spain. Although al-Malik worked to extensively settle Arab communities to control the Berbers, his descendant, Abd al-Rahman, who fled to Africa following the Abbasid revolution, was of Berber mother. The caliphates and emirates that would involve Algeria and Morocco in the following centuries would be ruled by dynasties of substantially Berber origin, although deeply Arabized culturally. In the 11th century, when the Berber dynasty of the Zirid emirs, who controlled the territory between Libya and the Moroccan hinterland on behalf of the Arab caliphs of the Fatimid dynasty, declared their independence in reaction to the fact that Fatimids relocated a whole series of Bedouin tribes to Africa, this form of Arab massive migration would have a substantial impact on the social and ethnic fabric of the Maghreb, and even on its territory. The lands now occupied by the Bedouin tribes would become uncultivated and desertified, and many of the originally sedimentary Berber farming communities would convert into nomadic herding communities. A study by genetist Almud Nebel has also shown that although not all-encompassing, the Arab contribution to the genetic pool of the Maghreb that was brought in this phase of its history has left important traces up to our days. Therefore, the one single reality about the Islamic world that in medieval Europe is indicated with the term Moors is indeed mixed, and is formed by Arabs and Berbers. The presence of black individuals within the Arab world traces all the way back before the birth of Islam, and can be traced to contacts between Yemen, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. According to the Islamic tradition, there were several black people among the first companions of Muhammad, and one of these, who is also remembered with the name Bilal ibn Rabah, was an Ethiopian, and we have iconography that shows us what he looked like. Now, the same can be said about the Berber world, in the sense that as we read the ancient sources, specifically Greek ones, we have mentions of populations that are, in fact, mixed, such as, for example, the above-mentioned Melanogaetuli, but also the Leuca-Ethiopes, which, as we know, were settled in the area of present-day Morocco. Now, the 10th century Arab geographer Ibn Hawqal, pardon my pronunciation, describes in detail the phenotypes of various Berber communities, indicating some are substantially mixed or half, who were the result of mixing with the Sudan, another term in the Arabic language that indicates black people. According to the historian Ibn Ash-Shabat, who wrote in the 12th century, when Cordoba was invaded, the Muslim forces managed to conquer its fortified cathedral thanks to a black soldier who discovered a secret underground passage leading inside. Now, what happened is that initially this soldier was captured by the Visigoth, but then he had managed to escape because he found this secret passage, and then he showed this passage to Tariq. And according to the historian we just mentioned, during his brief captivity, the Christians of Spain were incredibly astonished by his looks, specifically because of how black his skin was. So, of course, when we say black, we have to remember, as we mentioned many times on this channel, is that Africa is home to the highest level of phenotypic divergence within its multiple populations and people. So probably he was one of those black people that are really, really black. But so much so that we are told by period sources that the Spanish actually tried to rub his skin with hemp to see if it was colored by ink. So in other words, they thought that his skin was dyed. Now, we do have to take this account with a grain of salt, because it's really not very likely that the Visigoth had never seen a black person, and it is possible that this was written, since it's written by Muslim sources, as a way to mock the ignorance of the Spanish. But regardless of the fact that it might be fictional, what we do need to consider is the piece of information that it tells us that there were indeed black people within the Islamic army that conquered Spain. That is a piece of information we can be sure of. The affirmation of the Berber dynasty of the Almoravids in the Maghreb and Spain between the 10th and 11th century encouraged the presence of black and mixed individuals in that part of the Islamic world which, more than others, was referred to by Europeans as Moorish. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. As early as the 10th century, the Almoravids began to exert a pervasive influence on the African kingdom of Takrur and the Empire of Ghana, and the chronicles speak of a king of Sudan, meaning of black people in this case, named Rai bin Rai, who participated with his army in the wars in Al-Andalus, or Spain, perhaps to be recognized as King Rabis of Takrur. The practice of mixed marriages in the Maghreb, already attested in the Berber context and subsequently encouraged by the polygamy that characterized Islam, came to involve even high social classes, and the Moroccan historian Muhammad ibn Idhari, writing in the 13th century, reports that the leader of the Almoravid dynasty, Abu Bakr ibn Umar, originally from the Berber tribe of Lamtuna, had a black wife, and that one of his sons, Ibrahim, was indeed black-skinned. As further proof of this idea of a mixed situation, Arabs, blacks, when it comes to the actual Moors that invaded Spain, we have a mention that is very eye-opening from a famous Arab historian, Muhammad ibn Khaldun, and he reports that at the Battle of Sagrajas, a clash that took place in Spain on October 23, 1086, and which put a halt to the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula by the Christian kingdoms of Leon, Castile, and Aragon, one of the three units into which the Almoravid army was divided, which was led by Sheikh Ibn Ramah Rakaz, was made up of 4,000 black combatants, armed with swords, shield, and javelin. So the entry and presence of this specific battalion is well documented, and it seems like that they fought well, up to a point that one of the soldiers from this battalion manages to wound King Alfonso VI on his thigh. Still, however, it is important to understand that except for these particular cases, the presence of individuals clearly identifiable as black must have been relatively limited within the totality of the Moorish reality, and while they are not absent in the 13th century miniatures of the Battle of San Esteban de Gormaz, fought in 997, they still represent a component, not the totality. To further support its idea that the Moors were in fact mixed, some were Arab, some were black, we can read a Scandinavian 12th century saga, which I have no idea how to pronounce, so I'll put it down here. Lots of words I can't pronounce today. But in this 12th century work, a clear distinction is made between the Serkir, so the Saracens, obviously of Arab origin, and the Blamen, which would mean the black men. Can also be translated as blue men. That's obviously not, because the Scandinavians thought that Africans or black Africans looked blue, but it's simply a matter of linguistic categorization. I've already spoken about this at length on this channel, but suffice to say that when they call them blue, it's not because they look blue, but it's just their way to say that they appear exotic. And it's also interesting that both the Saracens and the Blamen are mentioned as part of a Corsair ship. Mix it is. Moreover, it's important to keep in mind that in most cases, when substantial groups of black individuals are indicated in the Moorish forces, they almost always belong to a very specific social class. If we exclude the army of the mysterious king of Sudan, Rai bin Rai, all subsequent militias consisting of black fighters are of armed slaves, according to a common practice in the Islamic world, which is the same that had been given rise to the caste of Mamluks, in this case, white slaves of Circassian origin in Egypt. And as further evidence of this, there are several Christian sources that speak about the specific battle, the Battle of Las Navas, which occurred in 1212, and as they describe the tent of the Caliph in command, they tell us that he has a guard made specifically of black people, and these people are slaves as it's indicated by the golden chains that they wear. And in order to commemorate the subsequent Christian victory of this battle, golden chains were placed on the coat of arms of the House of Navarre, as we can see on this image. That's the origin of those golden chains here. So, to clarify, when it comes to the Moors, it's a mixed reality. The majority would have been Arab. Certain contingents of professional troops would have been black, but then the rest of the black individuals that we find fighting for the Moors, with the Moors, as Moors, by the way they are indicated in medieval European Christian sources, would be slave combatants. That is because this sort of influence of violent imposition and destruction exerted on the Ghana Empire by the Almoravids had led to a substantial flow of black slaves into the Maghreb. So the black militias employed in Spain probably originated from the personal army constituted by Emir Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the successor of Abu Bakr, starting from a nucleus of black people that he had armed and provided with mounts. And mind you, Ibn Ahari actually tells us about them, so this is very likely to be the case. Therefore, within the Moorish world, there must have existed two realities of people of color, distinct but strongly interconnected. On one hand, black and mixed individuals, slaves who had regained their freedom, or their descendants, or the children of mixed couples, of an Arab or Berber father and his black wife. These individuals could also be people of importance, either by birthright or thanks to the social mobility that theoretically characterized the Islamic world, but these were always isolated cases. Now, this sort of duality is a constant continuum that remained even up to our day in certain areas. For example, in the Tuareg communities, which include white individuals, half individuals, and black individuals in varying percentages depending on the area. Similarly, in contemporary Moroccan society, where the predominant majority are of Arab lineage, we can still find some individuals that have black ancestry, and also those that will be called Haratine, a minority that still is present in the territory today. It is indicative that the word Haratine is mostly traced back to a compound in the Arabic language meaning recently freed, which would suggest a servile origin for this minority. So, in conclusion, Moors is an artificial category that existed mostly in European imagination, but it didn't function as a proper scientific ethnonym. And if we understand Moors in their main usage by the sources, it primarily represents or identifies those Muslims who conquered Spain from the Maghreb, and they were certainly not all black. They would have been, as I was saying, mixed. But of course, as always, if you like this video, let me know in the comments below and we could continue this series as we always do, specifically talking about civilizations, peoples, and finding the answers through the sources. Thank you very much for watching, noble ones, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.